Nick writes female characters, and he writes all of your protagonists are female. And he does a really great job.
I don't know why, but they all are, yeah.
From my male point of view, I said it sounds like a female. What do I know? So,
welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
welcome to this week's show, brought to you by the fabulous people over at Vellum, which is by far the world's most fabulous, fun, amazing formatting solution in the entire galaxy. Like, you couldn't even go to Alpha Centauri and find a better formatting system to this. I mean,
be happier, be taller, run faster. Use Vellum.
Use Vellum. I am a recent convert to Vellum, so I'm just going to say, like, I enjoy it. I've switched over from another one.
You came from the dark side.
And while there's nothing wrong with the other one, this Vellum is so much easier. And I've been holding out because I didn't have a Mac, and I went and bought one just for this. So it was totally worth it. Today we have an awesome guest, which is Joseph Finder, who is a New York Times best-selling thriller author who's done so many books. It's phenomenal. His newest book is The Oligarch's Daughter. It's fabulous. I'm reading it right now and can't get enough of it. But before we get started with him, we're going to have a lot to talk to him about. Let's have a listener question.
What you got?
Are you prepared? This comes from Jason McDonald in Claremont.
He's from Claremont? Oh, in that case, I'm fully unprepared.
I don't know. Is that Florida? Claremont, Florida, I believe.
I don't even know where it is. To be honest. I think there's one in California.
There's probably one in Texas. There's one, like,
that's true. Yes.
Everywhere. So anyway, Jason, he has a question, and it is: if you could co-write a book with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be, and what genre would the book be? So any historical figure, dead or alive. Yeah.
Oh wow, Genghis Khan.
You could write with Genghis Khan.
No, the heck, I'm writing with Genghis Khan. You get a word wrong, and he's like, off with his head.
Well, also, did he speak English? I mean, is that going to be?
No,
you might have
didn't.
To figure that one out too, like, because I don't speak much outside of English. So
right, yeah, I'd have my head on a spike.
No writing Caesar. I don't know any Latin, so Shakespeare.
I'm going Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. Okay.
I don't think there'd be much co-writing with that. It would be him telling me what to do. And then go, no.
I hope it's like sci-fi, though. I mean, Winston Churchill writing sci-fi would be pretty awesome.
That would be funny. Yeah, he did some writing. He was quite the painter, but he did some writing stuff too. So I feel like he was more in the non-fiction category. But let's go with sci-fi. I'm going to write sci-fi with Winston Churchill. How about you?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, all that time asking your question, I didn't really think about it that much. So that was a challenge. I mean, obviously, my big go-to would be like somebody really like to write a book like Mark Twain. I mean, I've always been a huge fan. I think George Patton might be interesting, like to get like a but probably wouldn't do like a historical war, but I'm leaning toward Western with
a Western with tanks.
A Western with tanks. There you go. So
it could happen. It could.
You never know. But anyway, let's move on to our guest, because we have a really awesome guest today, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Joseph Finder, he's written like 20 books, and they've been bestsellers like throughout. So he's going to have a lot to tell us about thrillers and, hopefully just some good information. So let's welcome Joseph. Welcome to the show, Joe. It's so great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's awesome. So we're just going to kind of just jump right in. Like to ask you right off of one of the questions we ask everyone. It's kind of like, how did you get started in writing and publishing? And is it something you always want to do, or did you have a previous life like the rest of us before you started writing?
I wanted to write since I was a kid, and my parents told me I wanted to be a lawyer. There was some disjunction there, So decided I wanted to write fiction because I read a lot of Robert Ludlum and stuff like that, Ken Follett. I gave myself 3 years to learn how to do it and see if I could. So I was teaching at the time while I was writing. So what I did was I made a list of the greatest thrillers ever written. read a bunch of them, and took notes while I was reading on index cards. Things like, how do you meet the protagonist, and what kind of guy or woman is the protagonist, and how does the book end, and what happens in Act 2, and this kind of stuff. And anyway, I wrote a novel, and I gave it to an agent who turned it down. And then I found an agent, big deal agent I met through a friend of a friend, who was the agent for Danielle Steele and people like that, real big names. So I sent him my revised novel, and he said no. And I called him up and I said, if you don't mind, what didn't you like about it? To his credit, he began to tell me. We talked for like over half an hour, and he told me what didn't work about the book, which was really, I was taking notes furiously. And then I sent it, I revised it and sent it to him again. And this time he sent me another note saying, don't send this to me again. I called him up and I said, tell me what you didn't like about it this time. And we had another conversation, and he was not annoyed by it. He was very generous. I find a lot of people in publishing can be actually quite generous. So he basically, based on his revisions, I wrote a draft that eventually got me an agent and a publisher with my first novel.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant. That's amazing. He gave you that much time. And that's not a story you hear that often, especially these days.
Out of curiosity, like what was some of his notes? Like it's something that I'm always looking to see what I got to prove in mine. So maybe.
Well, he said things like, your protagonist gets into trouble and we don't admire him enough. And you've successfully shown that he's got enemies and he's got challenges and all that, but we need to really admire the hero. And you've got to show us early on a reason to admire the hero. And I thought that was that's really smart advice. And I keep that with me, in my books today.
I was just to say, that's always tricky, isn't it? Right? Because unless things go wrong, it's a really boring story, especially when it comes to a thriller. Stuff has to go wrong. So, and it has to happen to your protagonist in some way. So you've got to have some stuff happen without them seeming like this ridiculous superhero and without seeming like an idiot. That's great feedback he gave you.
Yeah, that's really good. Is that your first book that you did? And which one was this?
That was the Moscow Club.
The Moscow Club. Okay. That's interesting. So I'm going to guess, based on your amount of research you did, you probably do a lot of outlining and planning your books ahead of time. Is that correct?
Not entirely. I basically outline the first maybe 25% of the book. And once I've got that figured out, I start writing. And I let myself sort of diverge from the outline where needed and start making it up without an outline, without any notes. But I found that I need to get the whole story in place and established. And for that, I need to do some outlining.
Do you know the ending of it?
I almost always know how it ends before I start writing. But I had gotten this notion, made this notion up of outlining the first chunk of the book. Robert Ludlum, who I met because we had the same agent, Ludlum told me that you really needed to outline a book very intensely. Like he would do 150-page single-spaced outlines.
Oh, wow. That's just a first draft, isn't it?
Well, so I did that for a book. And then at that point, I didn't want to write the book anymore.
Yeah, it's all done. Yeah.
It's all done. Yeah. So I learned then, don't over outline, that was too much.
It's such a personal preference. I mean, gosh, we interview a lot of folks who are very, very successful writers. And I haven't heard two that do it exactly the same way.
It's all very different. Yeah. Some people are very, very much religious outliners. Others, they just show up and go, I don't even know what the story's about and start typing. So,
Yeah, but, I think for thrillers, I think you've got to be a little more attentive to the structure of the book. I don't think you can just sit there and make it up. So I was on a panel with my friend Lee Child, and Lee Child said he never does an outline. He's famous for that. He just goes in every day and starts writing. Lee knows what the story is.
I think I felt that way about a lot of people who say they don't outline. Is yes, they don't write it down, but they have it in their head what's going on. They've thought out the storyline at least a little bit, even if you don't put it on paper. So
writing the kind of thrillers that you write that are intensive information, there's a lot of stuff in there. Do you do a lot of research before you start writing, or in that early outline part, or do you, and then later on in the book, as you come across something you need to research, do you stop and research it, or do you go back to it? How do you kind of plan through that?
Well, sort of both. I do a fair amount of research at the beginning before I start writing. The reason I do is because I get a lot of ideas from the research, plot ideas from the research. It's all about coming up with plot ideas, with beats, as I call them, moments in the book. But then, there's always a problem of over researching. What you never want to do is make the reader think that, you had to put it all in there, all the research you did, Damn it, I did this research. You're going to see it, whether you like it or not. So while I'm writing, I will stop and say, no, wait a second. What about blah, blah, blah? And I'll go look it up. And the research that I do while I'm writing is by far the most efficient research, very targeted.
So how do you do about like keeping up with like the cutting edge of technology? I mean, because you've got definitely the thrillers often have this technology built into it, but how do you keep up with what's going on with not only just the cutting edge of technology, but also like the geopolitical nature of some of your books?
Yeah, well, don't forget, I'm reading this all to interpret it for the general reader. This is not for an academic. This is not for a scientist. This is not for a member of the United Nations or anything like that,
That doesn't mean the reader won't correct you.
They will. I'll get emails all the time. Yeah. So I think that basically I read a lot and I have good sources. I've got a Rolodex of sources. And I've got one tech guy, for example, who's great. So I call him up and I'll say, all right, now I need to trace a phone here, but it's a burner phone and that kind of thing. How do you do it? And he knows all the latest stuff up to date. So I get it from my sources, really.
That's a heck of a Rolodex to have. I can only imagine over the years how you've accumulated some really key people.
I am so lucky to have such a great resource like that.
So that's kind of like, you ever get like the weirdest person you've ever like had to ask a strange question to that they're like,
Yeah, I ask strange questions, but that's the way I can sort out the good sources from the bad ones. There are some sources that I call Dr. Knows.
Yeah.
you call them up and you say, so how would I do such and such? They say, no, it's impossible. And then it's like, well, screw you. I mean, help me out here.
Yeah, let's pretend like it has to happen, and then how can we do it? Yeah, that's the whole James Kirk kind of thing where he's like tells Scotty it can't be done. He goes, nope, you got to make it happen. So let's figure out how to make it happen. So,
well, as long as it's not too outlandish, it's going to be true in a couple of years. The way technology moves, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, your thrillers are kind of really based in realism too. Like some people can jump around, but how do you kind of balance that with like the accurate reality versus like you were just talking about what can be done, what can't be done, just to keep it going with a fast-paced story where, what is your technique for just kind of managing that balancing act right there?
Well, my attitude is if it works well in fiction, keep it in. So I have a very good sense for when I'm writing something, if it seems unrealistic or it will seem unrealistic to the reader, I'll cut that out. And it's a matter of gut instinct for me.
So it's just about, hey, if this feels a little off or a little, or an eye roll. And I joke when the first person who reads my books are always my wife. And I can always tell when I get something, her note at the side is always eye roll. Like, oh, yeah. So I know maybe I have either stretched it too far or not. That doesn't mean I take it out, because sometimes I'm like, this is just fun. So,
Yeah, exactly. Some of the most fun scenes are the ones that are not necessarily the most realistic.
oh, totally.
And we are here to produce drama,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a tricky balance these days, I feel, especially up against all the movies that are out there where the hero outruns fire all the time. They really push what is ridiculous and unachievable. So it sort of becomes accepted, like that's how a hero can do it now. And I know personally, I struggle with that. I want to keep it within the bounds of possibility.
I agree. You watch a movie like Mission Impossible or any of the numbered sequels after that, and they do stuff which is sort of pushing the credibility. And so what do? I go to my sources and I'll say, all right, did you see the movie where such and such happens? Oh, yeah. So is that possible? No. How would I do it anyway? So I'll try to sort of get enough details to make it plausible.
Do you ever bend a little bit of the reality just to kind of fit your literary, and I was just reading Matthew Riley's book where he talked about, and I was going to talk to Nick about it, because Nick and I are both scuba divers, and in his book, he has pills that he takes to counteract the nitrogen. And I was like, well, that doesn't exist, but that would be nice.
Well, that would be great if you had them, right? If they exist.
That would be really handy, yeah.
It was really, I was like, huh. I was like,
they'd be very, very expensive pills.
But sometimes you can bend a little bit of the reality to fit,
Yeah.
I guess. But
yeah, it's called science fiction.
Yeah, it's fiction for a reason, Some of the greatest predictions have been made from science fiction.
Oh,
yeah.
Watch
Totally.
the old Star Treks, right? Half the things they're doing on there that were like, this is crazy.
It goes back to H.G. Wells.
True.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely.
So I don't look down my nose at stuff like that, at making something up. As long as it feels plausible, you can couch it in enough prosaic real world detail that it feels possible,
You talked about beats earlier, so you obviously make a conscious effort in your stories to hit those certain beats. So when you're trying to balance those action scenes with the breather scenes, and obviously it escalates as the book goes on, but are you very conscious, like when you're plotting out and planning out, you're like, okay, I need 2 scenes to build up to this big action scene that'll be a long chapter, and then I'll need a couple of chapters or beats, or how long to settle, calm, let the reader breathe again before I go again? Is it that consciously planned out?
Not that much. I do that kind of thing by instinct. So I'll say, oh, wait, I've got a great idea for a scene. Here's a set piece. This will be great. And so I'll do a scene and I'll work on it for a couple of days. Then I'll do, as you call it, the breather scene, where they're allowing the reader to catch their breath. And I might have another action scene, or I might wait for a number of scenes. I have a sign above my computer that says, reverse, reveal, surprise. Every scene has got to do one of those 3 things.
Oh, I like that. I had to think about that a second. I'm like, okay.
If you surprise the reader, that's as good as a great action scene. Scene where the reader goes, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's cool.
So that was actually going to lead up to the question I was getting ready to ask you. So you can maybe kind of dig into a little bit more. But so if you hit a scene that isn't working, do you use those 3 measures as a way to try to figure out how to fix it? Or is there another thing that you might do to kind of go, well, this is falling flat. This is not exciting, or, this is just.
Yeah. I will look at a scene that I've written and I'll say, all right, what did I do here? Did I reverse the action? Did I reveal something interesting? Did I surprise the reader? No. Get back to that scene and work on it until you do one or the other.
And do you ever find that you literally, I'm using the old days terms of crunching up the paper and throwing it in the bin, but do you ever just delete one and go, nope, I got to start this sucker over again right now?
Yes, absolutely.
It's brave to do that.
Yeah, but you have to do it. And otherwise you're sort of writing a scene that's just decaying in front of you as you work on it. And you'll know it's not good. So I just delete it. You have to be ruthless,
So what about I mean, from thriller writers, we and Nick and I talk about this a lot, but like, what are some tropes that you would just like avoid, or like just like, either you want to avoid, or maybe you want to like subvert?
Tropes that I want to avoid.
Things that make you cringe, right? When you see a movie on TV and you're just like, oh, you're reading a book and going, no.
Like Nick hates it when my guy breaks his ribs and keeps going. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, having someone shot and then keep running or whatever.
Brush it off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you've ever been shot, I have never been shot. I've never had a bullet in my body, but from everyone I've talked to, it's really painful.
I can only imagine.
So it's just more realistic to talk about the pain and how they're going to deal with that. And you can still be a hero. Your character can still be a hero, even if he's trying to find a doctor who will take out the bullet without reporting it to the police.
Yeah, there's ways to work around it, right? The adrenaline is an absolutely amazing thing. We've all either experienced or seen or heard about, people who have had dramatic things, and you go on for a period of time while that adrenaline's pumping, and then it all catches up. But it's how you handle it after that a lot of the time that's the problem. Yeah, the ribs thing, that's pretty funny. We're binging a show right now, which is set in Pennsylvania. It's a TV cop show, and it's actually really good. It has some brilliant twists in it, called One Bright River or Long Bright River.
Long Bright River.
Apparently the book is fantastic. I haven't read it. I'm just watching the
book's
series.
Really good.
Yeah, it's great. The TV series is great. But they do. There's a bit where she gets beaten up, and you got 2 broken ribs. The next minute, the kid's hugging her and stuff. Believe me, I've broken ribs. You're out of action. You can't breathe.
In fairness, you don't want anybody to hug you without a broken rib. So you're going, no, I got a broken rib. It's not gonna change anything. So what about like let's jump to it like a little bit. Still kind of stay on this, but like another kind of crafty thing is that I found as I was reading through. I just read. I'm reading The Oligarch's Daughter right now, and I did read Vanished last week when we first kind of like talked with you, and I had picked it up and like, oh, I'm plowed through that. But your dialogue is amazing in there, and I really enjoyed like just kind of how fast paced you kept the dialogue going, but it still had purpose. And that's obviously something you think about, I would imagine. So I mean, kind of give us an idea of what goes into your head when you start looking at what makes good dialogue.
A lot of that, I hate to say it, is instinct. I've written so much by now that I know what sounds like a cheesy line. I know what it means to over-explain, and you just don't want that. You want to hold back as much as possible from the reader. I know how people talk, and people do not say, that when you went to college and you met that person such and such and whatever the hell. And it's like, nobody does that.
Delivering exposition in dialogue is challenge. If it's done well, I think it's done really well. If it's not done well, it feels awkward and like, eh.
Yeah. So I guess part of it is experience and part of it is instinct. But, there are plenty of movies and TV shows where the dialogue's really good. And, screenwriters in particular get really good at that, at having dialogue that can shift the mood or can reveal something, dialogue can do so much.
For like an aspiring writer who's trying to figure out like dialogue, I think TV has got some great. I mean, there's some great examples of things with great dialogue. Is there something that you go, this is a good prime example of how you should practice your dialogue, or especially if you see a show? Like for me, Justified is one of the ones I think has some amazing dialogue, and I tell people who are like working on dialogue, I said, think about that one. I'm not a huge fan of Yellowstone, but the dialogue is great. So
yeah. Breaking Bad, the dialogue was amazing. And there are screenwriters like David Koepp or Tony Gilroy who just write great dialogue that jumps off the page as you read the script. So I will, if I'm struggling, and I do struggle, I will I'll watch a movie or watch a good TV show or read a script.
That's great. Just to stimulate your mind and push it in a different direction. So let's talk about characters a little bit. So a common thing in thrillers, and you use it, is ordinary people thrown into extraordinary situations. It's always a good one. So you write a lot of standalones. I know you've got a series of 4, but you've also got mainly standalones in the same genre with the same generally type of hero. How do you make them distinct? Is that a conscious thing going in, like I've got to make this guy stand on his own a little bit?
I think each book I come up with a character who I feel is different enough from something I've written before, largely because I want to do that. I want to write a character who's different. I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. So it has to do with the conception of the book, how you start it. And my books start with a what-if premise. They don't start with character. But the next thing I do is say, so what kind of person could fall into this situation right here? And what's plausible? And if it's a judge, let's make it a woman judge, because I haven't done a woman character in a while, Or if it's a businessman, let's make him interesting. He's a coffee salesman, just because I'm into coffee. So I get to do a little research about coffee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy writing female characters?
I do, yeah.
It was interesting. We were just chatting with Sandra Brown the other day. Actually, the show airs today. And she was talking about how much she enjoys writing a male protagonist.
Nick writes female characters, and he writes all of your protagonists are female. He does a really great job.
I don't know why, but they all are, yeah.
From my male point of view, I said it sounds like a female. What do I know? So, but my wife likes it too, so I guess that counts. But so obviously we talked a little bit about your research that you do with your Rolodex of sources, which is brilliant too. I think that's something we all should be kind of catching up on. But what's the best research, I guess, is the question I want to ask, that you've ever had to do for a book?
What's the deepest dive, right?
Deepest dive, that's the word I was looking for.
Well, I think I once wrote a novel which was too scary called Buried Secrets. And in it, a young girl is buried alive. And I have claustrophobia. So I wanted to know what would it be like to be locked into a coffin. So I called up a couple of funeral homes and asked if they would do that for me.
Oh, my gosh.
Most of them hung up on me.
I bet they did. I bet you weren't the first person to call them either.
The sick people.
They're like, oh, it's this guy again.
Right.
Another weirdo.
Right. He says he's a writer, but what do we know?
So I went to this funeral home and went down to the basement where they have all the caskets, and they put me into one and closed the lid and clicked it and locked it. And I realized the physiological reactions you get, someone like me. I mean, on the one hand, it was very comfortable. I was lying back on this mattress-like thing. It was very surprisingly comfortable. Why do they make it comfortable?
Get ready to ask that question. Like, who needs a pillow top at that point?
Right, exactly. But, my heart was racing and I was sweating. After like a minute, I just said, okay, I got it. And I said, you can let me out now. And they didn't hear me.
Oh, no.
The guy was in the other room. So I spent
He left you?
He left me there, yeah. He sort of thought I wanted to be in the casket for half an hour or something. Anyway, he came back a few minutes later. That was actually a really good research experience for me.
Oh, my God. That sounds terrifying. That has to be the darkest dark you've ever been in. We think it's dark sometimes, but that is truly the zero light.
That is kind of something, yeah. My mother-in-law, that's her big fear, is to be buried alive. So she wants to have the little bell and everything in there so she can ring it.
You just say those words and it's terrifying, right? I mean, you just talk about it. Oh, my gosh. But it gave me a great visual image of the undertakers that finally said yes to you. They sounded like a bunch of New Jersey gangsters, like, oh, come on down, we'll put you in a coffin, no problem, man. Outside doing a drug deal next door while you're, hey, I'll get you out in a minute.
Take it easy. I'll be there.
I would have taken my wife along to make sure she got me out when I was ready to get out.
You sure your wife?
She might be like, oh, it's quiet for a little bit.
I came home that night and told my wife what I had done and said, you are fucking crazy.
I concur with your wife, actually. I think I've done a lot of things in my life, but I don't think I'd do that. All right. We have a question we ask everyone on the show, Joe. So we're going to fire it at you here, and then we'll have one more, and then we'll let you off the hook. We ask, what do you feel is your author's superpower? What is the one thing you feel is your best strength?
My sense of pace. I feel like I've developed this skill at pacing a story so that the reader is caught up in it and is pulled along. And it's taken me a while to learn how to do it. But I guess, it sounds immodest, I realize, but that's probably...
Not at all. You've earned the right to say things like that, Joe.
Yeah, I think pacing is the one thing a lot of people could work on too, because it is a challenge. Because I write pretty high action, and when I get to those, I'm like, am I leaving it that lull too low for too long? My goal is to keep everybody staying up all night. I'm sure you do the same thing, and it's a challenge to keep that. Just keep reading and keep them reading and keep them on their toes. So,
yeah.
All right, we got one more at you.
We got one more question, and this one's a little bit more fun. I don't know, fun, they're all fun, but we have a little wheel of questions here. So it's a random question, and we random-ish. We select the questions and put them on the board. So, okay, if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It would be prime steak.
That would be a short life.
You only get one thing to eat.
Might as well go out in style.
I was saying, you want to sit there and eat beets for the rest of your life? No, I'm with you on that one. I want to eat something good. So,
give me a defibrillator and prime steak. Joe, this has been fantastic. It really is a treat for us to chat with you, and thank you for sharing your insights. Some very wise words of wisdom you've thrown at us. Thank you.
Great talking with you guys. Thank you.
All right, let's say another big thank you to Vellum for supporting the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Best formatting software out there available
in the galaxy.
You heard it first here.
Thank you so much, Joseph Finder. That was really great. Man, that was educational.
What a great guy.
Just blown my mind on a couple of things there. So
I didn't want to stop. I got to be honest. And I've got, what do you call it? Goosebumps from the coffin thing. Oh my God.
You're going to go sit in the coffin sometime and get that experience?
No. I've lived it through him. I'm done. I'm not doing that. So, I'm a little claustrophobic, but not as bad as I used to be. I go inside pretty tight spaces in shipwrecks.
I was going to say, you're a diver. Most divers don't. And a race car driver. Didn't you have to get in like a small little car? And
I never got claustrophobic in a race car. But I grew up doing that. It was kind of... Yeah, but I know some people get claustrophobic with just a helmet on.
That's true. But speaking of claustrophobic, I just saw a thing yesterday where they're doing a course for divers at some place in Florida where they could do the human-powered submarines. And this guy, have you seen him? The guy takes the cylinder off, puts it in, and then he slides into this. Looked like a torpedo to me, and it just takes off and starts going with it. And I was like, "Well, that looks tight." I don't know if I feel like. But no, back to Joe. He had some great insight there, and those index cards and his Rolodex. Those are some things to think about. Like if you're really wanting to study how to be a thriller writer and you haven't done it, then picking up the top 10 thriller writers and seeing how they do it, and then taking notes on it. That to me is brilliant. So
I think that was brilliant, and his answer on the pacing was he kind of does it instinctively, but that instinct is built on top of the work that he put in early on.
Well, and it goes a lot like with when we talk about plotting. Like everybody has an idea of what story is. So if you do any of that, then you kind of develop an instinct, and as you practice it, that practice and then that taking notes on what is working and what isn't, that makes a big difference in how you can.
Yeah, and there's lots of courses and various things you can read, watch, and everything about beats and timing. And hey, there's a lot of it is really good stuff. But ultimately, you do have to develop that feel for it, because it's no two situations are the same. No two protagonists are the same. No two stories should be exactly the same. So the natural pacing is going to vary just a little bit. So you can't say at 20,000 words, I'm going to have this happen, right? Because by the time you get to 20,000 words, that point might be at 23,000 words.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you just got that's a flow to it. I mean, if you're doing like he said, Robert Ludlum, who puts out what do you say, 150-page outline. I mean, you know where everything's happening, but you've written that as a first draft, in my opinion, too. So
yeah, it's like
you
our
already
buddy
know.
DD Black, right?
Oh yeah, same thing. Yeah, that's the first draft at that point. But no, I think it's great. I got some information that I'm going to definitely take and try to put into practice. Hopefully, some of our listeners will too. So
absolutely, reverse reveal surprise. So set them back, reveal something, and then and surprise them. So three great points to add in there. All right. That was fantastic. So check out the show notes for links to Joe's information, as well as our book, social media, all that good stuff. And look for episodes every 2 weeks. So until next time, be cool to each other.
And fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favorite platform for alerts on new shows coming every 2 weeks.